Folks of the weather, welcome to this edition of State of the Weather Address. Now, if you're a winter weather enthusiast, you might really like this video because I've got some good news. But that being said, I'm not going to be like the media and overhype stuff. We're going to get straight down to the meteorological raw data. So let's crack right into it, and I'll show you what I am thinking for this upcoming potential winter storm on Friday, November 18th. Let's get right into it. So the model has been very consistent at showing a very powerful low pressure system ejecting out of Colorado on Thursday night around 0Z, 7 p.m. Thursday night. That's technically 0Z Friday, but you can see very nice cyclonic flow around this thing. You're going to get some cold, very cold air behind it and some very warm, moist air out ahead of it. And so we could be dealing with both severe weather and winter weather, but I do think the winter weather threat is going to be higher. So let's just kind of fast forward this thing a little bit. This is 992 millibars in here in the middle of this low pressure system. Very wound up, probably going to be a lot of wind on the back side of it. When you get isobars, when you get isobars really packed together like you see here in this area, it's very hard to paint and play this at the same time. You're going to get a lot of wind. So you're going to get a lot of wind when they're packed together like that. When they're farther apart, probably not as much wind. But this is on Friday morning. So let's fast forward it just a little bit here to Friday evening. Friday afternoon, Friday evening. This thing really continues to be wound up. 994 millibar right here. Very packed winds here. Probably going to get some very cold air behind it. Windy as well. But you see the front here. The cold front is very strong. Very strong. And it's moist out ahead of it. Which can mean there could be enough moisture for some severe weather. Maybe as far north as Iowa down to Texas. The trajectories of the moisture coming right out of the Gulf too. So you got some deep moisture coming out of there for this time of year. But let's look at the instability real fast to see if we're going to have enough instability. We need instability for severe thunderstorms. Okay, the instability is actually relatively weak, but you can see there's a little bit out ahead of this front. It actually goes up to Minnesota. That's those values are typically between 0 and 1,000, what we're looking at right now. There could be some severe weather in Texas, potentially. I think that's going to be a little bit far south, but we could get some severe weather down there. But another area we could get some isolated severe weather is up here in southern Minnesota and into Iowa, where you have around 500 CAPE in some areas. That's really borderline. You typically want between 500 and 1,000 minimum. That's barely getting to 500, but we could probably see some thunderstorms out ahead of that front. Now, for the winter enthusiasts, let's look at the snow potential for the northern plains. Let's get right into it. So this map I pulled up is the 1,000 millibar to 500 millibar thickness. And this essentially measures the average temperature for a given location for all of the atmosphere within that 1,000 millibar to 5,000 millibar height range. It just kind of measures the average temperature of the atmosphere. Now this blue line right here indicates temperatures that are averaged out below freezing in the atmosphere. Okay, that's the 540 line. So anything along and north of that line, you're going to get below freezing temperatures on average. And chances are, if the average temperature of the atmosphere is below freezing, you're going to be dealing with freezing precipitation or even snow. So like lines farther back, that just means colder and colder temperatures. Lines farther ahead of it mean warmer and warmer temperatures. So this is Thursday. You got the low pressure system ejecting out of Colorado. You can also find fronts on this, warm fronts and cold fronts. Where you get gradients that are packed together like this, you're probably going to see a front. Now, out ahead of this low pressure system, you're probably going to get a warm front out here, kind of right at the start of that packing, kind of like that. And then as you can see out here, they start to spread apart. So probably not really any of a strong front out there. It's going to be right out ahead of this, kind of to about the end of this last pressure isobar line right here. So behind it, we can see a cold front. Right behind it, you can see all those packed together thickness lines. So you're going to get cold conditions behind it and warm conditions out ahead of it. And you get precip along and north of warm fronts. So you can get some precip out here. Again, this is our freezing line. So anything south of that line probably going to be rain. Anything north of that line, you could be dealing with some snow. So we could be dealing with some snow out in the Rockies and into Montana on Thursday night. So let's fast forward this in the future and see what happens here. This is going into the day on Friday, and I'm going to stop at that frame where we had severe weather in Iowa and Minnesota. That was 18Z. This is right here on Friday, which is in the early afternoon. So we can see that cold front right here-ish, and you can see storms right along that front, maybe some severe weather all the way up to southern Minnesota. This is our low pressure system, and we got our warm front kind of right in this area. So near the triple point where we got our cold front and our warm front converging there, you could get some severe weather. I would not be surprised to see some isolated severe weather there. But where's the snow at? The snow is typically located with low pressure systems north of the warm front and or behind the low pressure system, kind of on the northwest side where we have something called a deformation band. Now this system, it's pretty early in the year, so I don't know that there's going to be much snow along and north of the warm front. As you can see, this is our 540 line right here. This is where the freezing line is, and that extends right in this area. Okay, so we could be dealing with snow out in Nebraska and parts of the central and eastern Dakotas on Friday. And these colors, they measure how much precipitation is going to fall. It's not going to measure how much snow is going to fall, just how much liquid. If it came down as rain, we can translate that into snowfall amounts. So here it's saying, I think it's within 6 hours here, it's forecasting in this little area 0.5 to as much as maybe 0.75 inches of liquid, which typically translates to 5 to 7.5 inches of snow. I think in this situation it would too. And when you get colder conditions, it can be actually more snow, but we'll make it simple right now. So you could be dealing with several inches of snow in the Dakotas. So let's fast forward this a little bit. As we get into Friday night into Saturday morning, this low pressure system still very wound up. Tracks into Minnesota. It could be dealing with some snow in northern Minnesota. And it tracks into Canada and begins to weaken out. Okay, the storm really begins to weaken out there. So that being said, let's look at this kind of zoomed in with more detailed temperatures, with the surface temperatures. So I've zoomed in, and this map is from pivotalweather.com. Great website for models, especially if you want really pretty maps here. This is for Thursday night around 7 p.m. You got your low pressure system out in Colorado. Now our 32 degree line is right here, right when you get the first shade of blue. And it's kind of right in this area right here. So just pay attention to that. These are surface temperatures. This is not for the entire layer of the atmosphere. But we'll look at them anyway. So we will advance forward, and I'm going to go to Friday at 18Z, which is Friday evening, and afternoon, and I'm going to show you that kind of same time frame we were examining earlier. So here's our low pressure system, 992. Our front is somewhere kind of in this area, our cold front. And you got your severe weather kind of along that, and here's our warm front out here. Your severe weather is going to be kind of in this area right here. Okay, what we were looking at earlier. Now, our snowfall is going to probably see, here's our 32 degree line. It's probably going to be along or north of that. Now, with surface temperatures, it could be ahead of that. It could be farther behind that because we're not measuring the other layers of the atmosphere. Like above the surface, it could actually get warmer. And who knows, it could be falling as rain up there, and then it'd be raining on the surface even though it's 32 degrees, which usually makes freezing rain. Or it could be much colder above, like really cold just above the surface and all the way up, but it's warmer at the surface, so you could still get snow because the snow hasn't melted in time. So you could get snow farther out. And one thing we do to examine that is to look at soundings, which soundings are essentially, and Now I'll click on one. We'll do an example here. Soundings just show the vertical column of the atmosphere for a given location. So this is higher up in the atmosphere, and this is farther down in the atmosphere towards the surface. Okay, so we'll come back to that in a second when we look at the snowfall amounts. But we'll fast forward this for now. This tracks into the Great Lakes regions, plenty of cold air. So you're going to be dealing with 30s all the way down into the Dakotas, Nebraska, Minnesota, and potentially some snow behind it. So that's a good indication that we could be seeing some winter weather. Now here's the precipitation, the composite reflectivity of the NAM computer model. This is basically the radar shown several days in advance, what it thinks the radar will look like, okay? And so any of these blue areas right here are snow. The green areas are rain, and anything with freezing rain is kind of a red shade, and sleet is kind of a pink shade. And again, these are from Pivotal Weather. Absolutely beautiful graphics, probably the best ones out there. I don't own the site, but go ahead and check these guys out. But use these models responsibly, because you could just look at one of these things and say, oh, there's going to be snow. There's going to be 20 inches of snow. But oftentimes you have to look at other things because the models aren't that good yet. Okay, so this is going to be Thursday night, and we're going to go into Friday morning here. This is Friday. This is Friday afternoon here, and you can see there's plenty of snow out behind this low pressure system into the Dakotas. Okay, it's really forecasting it. So, and remember I talked about there could be some rain south of it, just because the air down here probably not going to be cold enough. Okay, usually you're going to get snow anywhere left of the low pressure system, but the deep cold air is probably not going to be in that area, and there actually could be some rain behind it. Sometimes these strong low pressure systems, especially early on in the winter or late in the fall, they'll generate cold air just kind of in the middle, the core of the gradients, the pressure gradients right here. And so that actually might happen. I think that'll be something that's more realistic with the system, but we'll see. We'll see if we can get deep enough cold air. But boy, it's looking pretty good for the central and eastern Dakotas for snow here. This is a cool tool I will use when trying to figure out how warm the atmosphere is. So this is called the column max temperature from the surface to 500 millibars. And it basically says all the way up to the mid-levels of the atmosphere, what is the maximum temperature? So we can say that if the maximum temperature is below 0 degrees Celsius or 32 degrees, it means it's cold everywhere. It's below 32 degrees everywhere in that location, which means snow. Okay, so the 32 degree line, the 0 degrees Celsius line, is right where this blue area is. Okay, anything along in that way of the blue means it's below freezing everywhere from the surface to the mid-levels of the atmosphere, which is a very high likelihood there would be snow in that area. And the low pressure system, if we recall, is somewhere around there. And it actually had precipitation out as far east around this time, west, as the central Dakotas. And this is Friday afternoon, kind of at the same time there's severe weather happening out here. So this is even more promising for some potential snowfall. Okay, so let's finally look at the snowfall predictions by the GFS here for Thursday into Saturday. Let's get right into it. All right, so what's the GFS saying? We're going to start off with Thursday night around 7 p.m. It's got snowfall over an inch to maybe several inches out in Wyoming. Now let's fast forward into the day on Friday. This is Friday around 18Z. It's got several inches actually in the Dakotas, and it's making its way into Minnesota as well. Now, I got to tell you, don't trust these things 100%. There's a lot of other stuff that goes into forecasting, like the other stuff I was talking about. These things will change quite a bit from time to time, so don't trust this at face value. This is also only one computer model, okay? And usually these things, a lot of the time, it seems to me, especially the GFS, will have problems early on in the winter and sometimes later on in the winter as well, because you're dealing with freezing and above freezing issues and all sorts of stuff. I've just never been a huge fan of the GFS earlier on, but we'll look at it anyway. And it has plenty of snow out in the Dakotas. Now, let's click right over kind of this bullseye right here. It's around 10 inches or so. And here's our soundings I talked about. Now, to examine the temperatures, this line right here is 0 degrees. It's 32 degrees Fahrenheit, 0 degrees Celsius. And so you kind of track it up just like this. This is where it is 32 degrees in the atmosphere, okay, with that line as we go higher up. So you can see that the temperatures as we go higher up are all below freezing, okay? It's all below freezing. So that would be dealing with snow. We would be dealing with snow in that area. The GFS says, hey, it's going to snow in this area. So this red line right here is the temperatures. It's actually kind of stuck to that green line. That means it's snowing there. That's for another video. But let's just say these lines were kind of like over here-ish, like this. That means it would be above freezing right here because that's the freezing line. And we'd be dealing with like sleet, maybe even rain, freezing rain. But that doesn't seem to be the case here. It doesn't look like it's going to be a big freezing rain sleet event. It's probably just going to be rain and snow with this system, so we won't go too much into that. But let's fast forward it. This goes through Saturday. Plenty of snow out here in northern Minnesota, the Dakotas, maybe as far south as Nebraska into southern Minnesota. But like I said, sometimes these models will kind of overshoot the snow potential earlier on in the year. So this is just kind of something fun to look at. We'll continue to track it. Now, there's actually a little secret tool we can use to determine how sane the GFS is, how accurate it is farther out. And this is something I call the model sanity test. And I'll probably put some more detailed tutorials up about this. But the general gist is this is measuring surface pressure of 996 millibar, just wherever 996 millibar pressures are. And you can see there's some out here, there's some out here, there's one right here, and that's the storm we're examining. This is for Thursday evening. And so these are the same model. This is the GFS, but it's run several different times with different initial starting conditions, okay? And so it basically just says, okay, if the weather were to change just a little bit, like if it was a little bit warmer, would that impact how the model is forecasting things? And so if these lines are closer together, okay, if they're closer together like they are here, that means it has a better handle on it. It's probably more accurate. If they're farther apart and they're all over the place, it means it's more of a chaos kind of thing and it just doesn't know what it's doing. So as we get farther out, you'll see these things kind of start to split apart because the models aren't as accurate farther out. But we can see there's general consensus that there's going to be a low pressure system kind of right out in this area of Colorado. So we'll fast forward it. Still pretty good consensus that it tracks up into northeast Nebraska, out into Minnesota, but you start to lose some of those lines. So it might actually have confidence issues in terms of how strong the low pressure system is because some of those lines are disappearing. But nonetheless, there's still some good consensus on that as we go into Saturday. So that's just kind of a cool tool that I use for determining how sane the models are. So that all being said, I think there's some good indication that we could be dealing with our first snowstorm of the year for the Dakotas and into northern Minnesota with potentially several inches of snow. It's actually been kind of consistent lately. So that is now a threat with maybe some isolated thunderstorms, perhaps some severe weather in Minnesota, Iowa, and perhaps into Texas as well. All right, guys, with all that being said, if you want more of these weather forecasting videos and want to further your weather super forecasting skills and want some weather forecasting tutorials, go ahead and click that big old subscribe button here in the middle. I'll be releasing plenty more of these videos. And after you're done with that, if you want my winter forecast, my 80-page winter forecast with regional breakdowns, city breakdowns, precip and snowfall maps, I think it's the biggest, most detailed winter forecast out there. But it is a very simple read. Go ahead and click the link below this video. I will just enter your email and I will send it right off to you, okay? It's going to be an awesome winter forecast for you. It's very simple, but it's also very detailed. You're going to get a lot out of it. So go ahead and enter your email, and I'll send it right off right away. And after you're done with those two things, go ahead and follow me on Facebook. I'm actually going to be doing some forecasting live streaming during major hazardous weather events, maybe this winter storm. And it'll be just kind of a fun hangout session. I'll kind of go over some of the current live weather events happening, and I will do some Q&A and stuff. So if you have some questions, it's live streaming, so you can just comment, and I will answer some questions. Maybe do some, loosely organized forecasting tutorials as well on that as well. So go ahead and subscribe, then enter your email, get your winter forecast, and then follow me on Facebook, and I'll see you soon.